Shen, early morning session at the Shining Palace, matching Secretary Jiaji's poem. Cockcrow, the palace road in cold dawn light, an oriole welcomes spring from the palace wall. Sunrise bell at the golden gate, 1,000 doors thrown open. On jade steps, warrior figures greet officials crowding in. A pattern of swords and pendants. Stars begin to fade. Willows brush with flags and banners, damp with dew. Alone by the Phoenix pool, a guest is singing, with unmatched artistry, an ancient springtime song. So we continue today with Shen's poem. Yesterday we basically explained some of the background context surrounding Shen, morning sessions in the palace, the Daming, the Shining Palace, its main structures and buildings. So today we will just go, as usual, couplet by couplet, commenting on the poem. As we said, the general topic of the poem is pretty descriptive. It's describing a court scene. And I wouldn't call it ceremonial, but the entrance of the scholar officials into the palace in the morning for the morning audience with the emperor. So something that would have been pretty common to the life of all the scholar officials who served at the court at this time. One interesting thing about the poem is that this one does not actually describe the audience. It describes the coming to the audience, and then it describes in the last couplet, it jumps us to a sound that is heard probably by the scholar officials who are waiting to enter the hall in the imperial presence. This is quite interesting because the next poem we will read in the next day, Wang Wei's take on the same topic, does describe us the inner imperial presence. Okay then, so first couplet. Cockcrow, the palace road in cold dawn light. An oriole welcomes spring from the palace wall. So as usual, the first couplet locates us. We already have the title. So the first couplet locates us chronologically and also in the season. Yeah, so it's early morning. Scholars had to go to the palace before dawn. And it's spring. So the coming to the palace is presented in the first couplet, and it's focalized through two birds. In the first line, the cockcrow, which, like in the West and in all places, is generally associated with the beginning of the day. So we hear a sound, the cockcrow, and we can see in front of us the scholar is going to the palace road in cold dawn light. It's still pretty dark. The sun is still rising or about to rise. And, the road leading to the palace is painted ahead of us. So we have an oral element, the cockcrow, and a visual element, the road. The palace road would have been a very big, wide avenue, one of the imperial avenues in the capital. I think in the original it's called the Purple Road. And just as in the West, purple being associated with the emperor as an imperial color. And the second line presents another bird. In this case, it's an oriole, which is a typical bird of spring, an early spring harbinger and symbol, and the poetic persona seems to be seeing or hearing the bird. That's not quite explicit in this translation, from the palace wall. So just as the scholar official and poet is arriving at the palace, another bird is seen or heard, in this case in or over the walls of the imperial precinct. There is an oriole singing or just showing its feathers, ruffling its feathers, and announcing spring. Second couplet. Sunrise bell at the golden gate, 1,000 doors thrown open. On jade steps, warrior figures greet officials crowding in. So the poem continues in a pretty linear progression. The first couplet was waking up, going towards the palace. In the second couplet, we are probably at the main entrance of the palace, at the Danfeng gate, perhaps. It's described as the Golden Gate, so it's probably this one. Before entering the palace, there was a relatively tedious and complex procedure of inspection by the bodyguards of the emperor, by the garrison inside the palace, who had to check that these scholars, had the appropriate tallies, and so that they had the right to enter the palace. They also checked them for weapons and things like that. So the moment of opening the gates happens. So we hear a bell that is supposed to announce the sunrise, and as the bell tolls, in synchrony, the doors, I imagine, all the doors to the gates of the imperial city open up, and the scholars start going in. 1,000 doors, maybe a bit of a hyperbole, but there were many doors in the imperial city, both the doors at the gates guarding the entrance and then the doors of the buildings inside and of the palaces. So with the strike of a sound, with the strike of a bell that matches the sunrise, the doors open, and on the jade steps, the warriors greet the officials. Jade steps, the steps were probably made of jade, but they might have been made of marble or of, relatively precious materials. Inside the gates, you have this, as we mentioned in the previous video, you have these very big courtyards, and you have sets of steps on left and right that the scholars follow, and I think they were called dragon wings because they seem to extend to the left and the right of the main hall to which the scholars are directing their steps. So the scholars would have climbed through these dragon wings, like little ants in a gigantic palatial structure. And in these marble or stone steps, they're climbing up. And the warriors are also, checking them, controlling them, not only through the main gate, I imagine, but afterwards when they are arriving at the doors or the entry of the hall, they're going to go themselves. So here in the first couplet, you got those bird images. In here, you get two object images, the sound of the sunrise bell and the view, perhaps, of the jade steps. Yeah? So of an oral and a visual. Yeah? Or perhaps Golden Gate is supposed to match jade steps. That's probably more like it. Remember, this is the first parallelistic couplet, so maybe Golden Gate goes with jade steps. So all emphasizing the luxuriousness of the surroundings while describing the progression. So entering the gates, opening of the gates, and progression with a military escort towards the inner part of the palace. Third couplet, a pattern of swords and pendants. Stars begin to fade. Willows brush with flags and banners damp with dew. So the next step is probably while in waiting for accessing the imperial presence in the audience, we get this juxtaposition of natural versus cultural elements. So in the first line, the natural element would be the disappearance of stars in the sky. Remember, the sun has just gone out, it's dawn, so the stars are fading away in the heavens. But these stars are reduplicated, as it were, by the star-like shiny swords and pendants that form a pattern below. So those swords will be the swords of the soldiers, of the warriors who are, guarding the access, and the pendants would be the jewel-like ornaments that Confucian scholars usually wore. They were pendants made of jade or of different precious stones, and they hang them from their belts. So we have these, shiny jade ornaments or stone ornaments, plus the shiny metal of the weapons, and they form a pattern when, that's the Chinese word for pattern, and it's used for literature as well, and for any recurrent and beautiful elements of nature, and for adornment. So this earthly pattern of the scholars and the soldiers mirrors the disappearing pattern of the stars fading away on the heavenly vault. In the second line, we have a similar juxtaposition. In this case, the pattern is between the willows. The imperial city is full of green spaces and verdure and vegetation and trees. So the willows seem to be brushing with the flags and the banners, which are the human element, the flags and banners of the regiments of imperial regalia. And it's morning. So it's morning and it's spring. We saw that from the second line. So dew has fallen at night time, and a shiny jewel-like dew, wets probably or the willows or the flags and banners, or both, probably, giving them a shiny lustre, jewel-like. Finally, the last couplet takes us away. So up to now, we've been getting a relatively straightforward zoom in and progression from going towards the palace, entering through the gates, waiting inside. And now, instead of getting the next element in the progression, which might have been the entrance to the imperial presence, we get an oral element that seems to come from further away, deep inside the palatial precinct. Alone by the Phoenix pool, the guest is singing, with unmatched artistry, an ancient springtime song. So, beyond the sight of what the scholar officials would have been able to see, because they would have been waiting probably at the second of the major halls of the imperial palace, well beyond that, there is another pavilion, another hall, the Zuye, and beyond that, there would have been the Phoenix Lake, which was a place for recreation for the emperor and his favorites. So, like a distant echo, perhaps while waiting in silence for being admitted to the imperial presence, the poet-scholar seems to hear a spring song coming from far away, and he guesses, he imagines, it is coming from the Phoenix pool, where a guest might be there singing a beautiful song. So the poem ends up not with the imperial presence, but it makes a jump, an oral jump, towards the inner precincts of the palace, and towards this beautiful song. It ends with this almost supernatural, beautiful spring song reaching the scholar officials before they start their work and before they see the emperor. So it's a nice haunting image and an oral image to end the poem on. Yeah, but as I said, it jumps towards the other aspect of the palatial precincts. They're not just the place where the bureaucrats come to work, they're also the place where the emperor enjoys pleasures like singing and enjoying nature.